Welcome to Session 4 of our 5x7 snapshot on the role of the clinical chaplain in military medical ethics. In the previous video, we mentioned the important ethical contribution of chaplains in maintaining a teleological focus in health encounters and deliberative ethics. In this video, we'll turn our focus to ecological dimensions of ethics in the military medical setting. In order to do that, we may need to carefully define or re-infuse with meaning the term ecology. The word ecology is derived from the Greek word ekos, which refers to home, but not only home. It refers to one's setting. In other words, the all-encompassing living context of a life with other human beings, perhaps pets and plant life, and also the sights and sounds and smells and rhythms and sensations and architecture and ritual and the interrelationship of all of these things coming together to form a sometimes tangible and also sometimes quite intangible sense of overall settledness. That is ecology. How does it relate to ethics? Once again, it's an aspect of the human condition not often discussed in medical ethics, unless perhaps at times in the ethics of care. However, it has everything to do with being human and remaining human in one's perspective, which is always a dual protective stance. That is, by keeping her view of the humanity of her patients full and vibrant, the health worker correspondingly maintains her own humanity in its fullness and vibrancy, and vice versa. A close colleague of mine, a clinical chaplain and human rights specialist, was once called into a hospital ward to consult with a refugee from a sub-Saharan African nation. This woman had quite remarkably been resettled with her entire family, including her husband, her 2 adult sons, their wives, and their children, in a popular and economically vibrant city in the Pacific Northwest, right next to a large international airport. Her sons and husband went to work at the airport and made a good living wage, and everybody was healthy, progressing in learning English and adjusting to life in their new country. After about 18 months of being resettled, the woman I mentioned began to struggle. She had persistently low moods, major changes in appetite and sleep, and difficulty finding joy in daily life. She went to see a health professional and was prescribed some psychotropic support, which she would not take. She spoke with a counselor, but didn't continue, spoke with another, but didn't continue with him either. She was eventually hospitalized during a relatively serious mental health crisis. During her stay, she met my friend, the chaplain with a specialty in human rights. He had a lot of experience working with refugees and spent a number of hours with her over a few days. When she was nearing the time to depart the hospital, my friend, the chaplain, approached her attending physician and asked whether he or the other staff had noticed her speaking often about darkness. For instance, feeling in the dark, having dark moods, expressing that she felt she had dark thoughts. The physician thought for a moment and said yes, he had noticed. My friend then posed the simple question, do you think this could be an ecological issue? Would you believe that this single, gentle observation made by the chaplain contributed very seriously to the restored health of the patient? As it turns out, it's very easy for us as health professionals, keeping our working diagnoses and paradigmatic frames in front of us, to interpret, or perhaps better said, to migrate poetic language into the language of damage and repair, the language of symptomology, the language of medical mechanics, in order to fit it into our dominant frames. But often poetic language contains openings, clues, that if taken within their widest ecological context, can be quite medically relevant in that they turn our attention outside of technical preoccupations. This incredibly resourceful and resilient woman had grown up in sub-Saharan Africa, in an equatorial region where precipitation was scarce and the sun did not deviate much in its course throughout the year. She'd not even owned a clock. Every day of her life, she marked time and completed tasks and met with the people she loved when the sun was in a certain position in the sky. The sun was an essential part of the setting of her life. It illumined and ordered her life, and she took this for granted. Now she'd been living in the Pacific Northwest, where it's overcast 300 days of the year. She was very much in the dark. She had become unsettled ecologically. Of course, there's more to it than this, yes, but certainly not less. She responded quite well when her doctors explored this line of her experience, and this increased her trust in their advice. In addition to following some of her doctor's advice and having full spectrum lighting installed in her house and making plans to take advantage of opportunities to get out when the sun was out, she was actually able to mourn her loss of home once again, freshly, for a while, which was apparently something she needed. The chaplain had the professional space to explore her circumstances with her without haste, without being bound by any a priori assumptive lens. He was also trained in the clinical pastoral education process to appreciate how illness and suffering can be systemically and ecologically situated. When he encountered her poetic language, he did not migrate her words into the technical language of damage and repair, but rather became curious as to their deeper invitation. The ethical significance of ecological sensitivity cannot be overstated. People in difficult situations often experience systemic binds. For instance, family rules and patterns, which are often subtle and intangible, but which very much create senses of boundary or enforced action and reaction that can be baffling to health workers and helping professionals trying to help them. They're often feeling dislocated ecologically, sleeping in a strange place, even in a waiting room sometimes, in an antiseptic environment, not at all like home, eating cafeteria food, being given suggested guidelines for decision-making they've never encountered before. Both in research and clinical settings, even the regular non-scientists can become insulated from how disorienting systemic binds and ecological dislocation can be on an individual or a family's ability to make a good decision. This is another reason why chaplains, whose clinical training is strongly focused in these areas, can make a great and really unique addition to multidisciplinary ethics teams. In the final video, we'll address religious themes in contemporary medical ethics and the importance of leveraging uniformed clinical chaplains as experts in working with such themes in a pluralistic context.